You know, when you think about the dawn of civilization, your mind probably jumps to the pyramids in Egypt, maybe the great philosophers in Greece. But way before them, there was one culture that pioneered, well, almost everything we think of as the foundation of society. We're talking about a civilization of incredible firsts, the Sumerians.
I mean, they didn't just build cities. They created the world's very first kingdom, and later, the first empire. That's a political blueprint that would be copied for thousands of years.
Can you even imagine a world with no recorded history? No laws, no stories written down? The Sumerians changed all of that forever. They invented the actual concept of writing. And to hold their booming society together, what do? They established the first organized codes of law, creating a real, formal system to govern their people and their powerful city-states.
So, who were these pioneers? Where on earth did this culture, which basically laid the groundwork for the entire ancient world, and you could argue our world, even come from?
Well, their story begins in a place that's often called the cradle of civilization, and believe me, it gets that name for a very, very good reason. So, way back around 6500 BC, civilization started to put down roots in southern Mesopotamia. You know, that fertile land nestled right between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. For thousands of years, Sumerian culture just thrived, innovating and building a foundation that would last long, long after their own era ended around 4100 BC.
So, what was a Sumerian like? Well, picture this. They were a deeply religious and agricultural people for sure, but they also put this huge value on art, on culture, and especially on the written word. They had evolved from being hunter-gatherers, and their innovations were so fundamental that they just echoed through later giants like Egypt, Greece, and even Rome.
So how did they keep it all together? How did they organize themselves? Well, it turns out their political structure wasn't static at all. It went through this absolutely fascinating transformation.
Get this. In their earliest days, the Sumerians actually had a form of democracy. Key government positions were filled by elections, and a council made all the big decisions. But as warfare between the city-states became more and more common, they realized they needed a single, decisive leader, and that led to the rise of the king, or the Lugal, which literally translates to big man, who took ultimate control.
And you can see that structure reflected in their society, which had some pretty clear divisions. At the very top, you had the upper class, the priests, the scribes, the royalty. And then below them were the commoners, the incredibly skilled artisans and laborers. The jewelers, carpenters, smiths, and builders who were actually physically constructing the Sumerian world.
And this right here, this quote, it tells you everything about their value system. Sure, craftsmanship was essential, but the most respected, the most prestigious jobs were academic or religious. If you had high aspirations, the ultimate goal was to become a scribe or a priest, someone who wielded the power of knowledge and faith.
Okay, and that brings us to the real heart of their legacy, the inventions that truly changed everything. Their most famous contribution is, without a doubt, cuneiform. And let's be absolutely clear, this wasn't just a writing system, it was the first known writing system in human history. It completely revolutionized how laws, stories, and business were recorded, and its influence spread across the entire ancient Middle East. Just think about that impact for a second. Cuneiform was actively used for over 5,000 years. That is a longer lifespan than many entire civilizations. Its influence is it's impossible to overstate.
But they didn't stop there. Oh no. They also gave us the wheel, the pickaxe, and the foundations of math, like arithmetic and geometry, which they used for really practical stuff, like accounting and building things. They developed a lunar solar calendar to track seasons for farming. They built advanced boats for trade. These people were just relentless innovators.
But beyond all the physical things they invented, their ideas about the world, the gods, and what happens after we die were maybe even more influential.
It's honestly incredible when you realize how many of the world's most enduring stories got their start right here. Think about it, a hierarchy of gods ruling from the heavens, the idea of humanity being created from clay, a catastrophic great flood, even stories about giants. All of these powerful myths were first recorded in Sumerian culture, way before they showed up anywhere else.
And their idea of the afterlife? It was incredibly detailed. They believed that when a Sumerian died, their soul would go down to the underworld, a place called Kur. There, you'd face judgment by the gods. The good ones? They were granted an eternity of bliss.
but the not-so-good ones were condemned to suffer. Does any of that sound familiar?
So, from government and writing to technology and religion, the Sumerians really were, without a doubt, the civilization of firsts. Their ideas and inventions didn't just fade away, they became the very bedrock that future empires were built on.
So that leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to think about. Was it the wheel that physically pushed humanity forward, or was it the written word that let our ideas travel through time itself? Which Sumerian first do you think truly changed the world forever?